The ocean is more than a vast expanse of water. It is a silent archive, preserving the echoes of civilizations long forgotten. Beneath the waves lies a story older than empires, older than written history. A story of kings whose dominion extended beyond the lands we know, into the uncharted seas. Among these legends, none captures the imagination like Atlantis, the fabled island of extraordinary wealth, power, and knowledge. Plato described Atlantis as a civilization so advanced that it seemed almost divine, a society whose cities gleamed with engineering marvels and whose people possessed wisdom far beyond their era. Then, in a single day and night of cataclysm, it vanished beneath the waves. For centuries, scholars have debated whether Atlantis was a philosophical allegory or a literal place, yet clues in myths, ruins, and oral traditions hint at something deeper, a civilization whose legacy may have survived in hidden ways. Some theories suggest that the descendants of Atlantis, the Ocean Kings, carried knowledge forward, encoded not in stone or manuscripts, but in life itself. Their DNA may preserve fragments of a civilization lost, a prophecy of survival embedded in bloodlines. In this story, history and myth converge, urging us to look beyond conventional accounts. This journey will descend into the depths of both oceans and time, tracing maps, ruins, artifacts, and genetic clues, exploring a world where memory persists beneath waves and within life itself. The lost rulers of Atlantis may not exist as mere legend. They may live on in subtle, hidden ways, waiting to reveal truths long thought forgotten. Atlantis has fascinated humanity for millennia. Plato's dialogues paint a picture of a civilization that challenged the limits of human achievement, with advanced cities, intricate canals, and knowledge surpassing the ancient world. Yet mainstream history dismisses these accounts as myth, a moral allegory warning against pride and hubris. But fragments of memory persist across continents, suggesting the possibility of a civilization whose story was too extraordinary to vanish entirely. From the Minoans to the Egyptians, from Sumer to distant flood myths, echoes of Atlantis appear in culture, architecture, and legend. Coastal ruins, anomalous maps, and shared myths hint at a civilization with advanced maritime knowledge, capable of surviving cataclysmic events and guiding humanity through hidden networks. Could Atlantis have been lost to the ocean, yet preserved in memory, culture, and even human biology? The Ocean Kings, rulers of Atlantis, may have anticipated their civilization's fall and encoded their wisdom for survival. Knowledge of navigation, engineering, and cosmology could have been carried forward through lineages, preserved in oral traditions, artifacts, and perhaps in DNA itself. As we explore these ideas, Atlantis emerges not just as a lost city, but as a civilization whose memory transcends stone and scrolls. Its story challenges conventional history, blending myth, science, and prophecy, and offering a tantalizing possibility that the legacy of the Ocean Kings persists, waiting to be uncovered in the whispers of the past, in the patterns of culture, and in the strands of life itself. Long before the first empires rose on the continents, before the pyramids of Egypt pierced the desert sky, and long before the stone cities of Mesopotamia hummed with life, there were those who ruled not from temples or palaces on land, but from the oceans themselves. They were the Ocean Kings, a lineage spoken of in hushed tones, scattered across the myths of distant civilizations. To the historians who dismiss them, they are no more than legend. But if one listens closely to the stories passed down through the ages, a pattern emerges, suggesting something far more extraordinary. A dynasty of rulers whose influence may have spanned both time and tide, whose legacy was intended to endure far beyond their own demise. Accounts of these oceanic monarchs appear in disparate corners of the ancient world. The Sumerians spoke of kings descending from the heavens, bringing knowledge and laws to humanity before vanishing beneath waters or distant lands. Egypt's earliest texts hint at a golden era predating the dynasties of the pharaohs, a time when seafarers wielded power both political and mystical. In the Aegean, Minoan frescoes depict figures adorned in regal garb, performing rituals connected to the sea, suggesting a reverence not merely for the waters, but for those who commanded them. Could these myths be fragments of memory, memories of rulers whose cities now lie beneath the waves? These ocean kings were said to possess more than the conventional trappings of royalty. They were engineers, navigators, and perhaps even custodians of knowledge that modern science is only beginning to comprehend. Tales describe them wielding a profound understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and the natural world, a knowledge so precise and advanced that it seems almost alien in its sophistication. Some scholars argue that the apparent technological leaps of early civilizations, from the pyramids to complex city planning, may have been inherited, passed down from these seafaring rulers. In other words, the ocean kings may not have been limited by the geography of their time. Their legacy was genetic, cultural, and intellectual, designed to survive beyond their physical dominion. But with their downfall, ancient myths often tell of a great deluge, a cataclysm that swept through the world, destroying kingdoms and dispersing survivors. Plato's account of Atlantis is only one among countless flood narratives. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the biblical story of Noah, the Indian tale of Manu, and countless other myths echo the same theme. A civilization lost beneath the waters, leaving behind only stories and scattered fragments. It is within these narratives that the ocean king's true significance emerges. The catastrophe may have erased their cities, but it could not erase their lineage. For some scholars, this is the key to understanding Atlantis, not as a city that vanished, but as a bloodline that persisted, carrying within it the knowledge and power of a civilization lost to time. In examining these lineages, researchers have noted peculiar patterns. Certain coastal populations, long isolated from continental migrations, display unique traits in folklore, cultural practices, and even genetic markers that suggest an unusual ancestry. Legends speak of rulers who could command the seas, who understood the rhythms of tides, storms, and currents. Was this simply metaphorical, or does it point to an inherited knowledge passed down through generations, an intuitive understanding of nature, geography, and human behavior, encoded within bloodlines that trace back to a vanished civilization? The Ocean King's influence may have extended far beyond mere survival. According to alternative historical theories, they maintained secret networks, preserving knowledge in hidden sanctuaries, guiding the development of emerging civilizations without revealing their true origin. Trade routes, maritime practices, and even early forms of diplomacy could have been shaped by these hidden rulers, ensuring that fragments of their civilization survived, subtly steering humanity toward paths of progress. Such influence would explain why, across the globe, disparate societies share surprisingly similar myths, symbols, and even technological concepts. Some researchers suggest that these rulers understood the impermanence of physical power and instead invested in genetic continuity. By ensuring their lineage endured, they encoded survival, memory, and perhaps even prophecy within their descendants. DNA, in this framework, becomes more than biology. It is a vessel of history, a repository of ancestral wisdom designed to outlast stone and paper. In this sense, the Ocean Kings were not just monarchs of territory. They were custodians of knowledge and legacy, rulers whose empire extended into the very building blocks of life itself. Yet, tracing these lineages is no simple task. The waters of history are murky, and much of the evidence has been submerged by time, lost to waves, or intentionally hidden. Mainstream archaeology often dismisses these connections as coincidence or myth. And yet, anomalies persist. Certain isolated populations demonstrate traits and traditions that appear out of place in their region, echoing distant cultures in ways conventional history cannot easily explain. Could these be remnants of a genetic and cultural memory stretching back to the ocean kings themselves? Even more compelling are the prophecies associated with these rulers. Across the ancient world, fragments of text speak of descendants who would rise at pivotal moments in history, carrying within them the wisdom of a civilization thought lost. Some of these prophecies suggest that the knowledge encoded in the bloodlines could influence not just survival, but understanding, the ability to decode natural laws, anticipate disasters, and preserve harmony between humanity and the environment. If true, these ocean kings were more than rulers. They were architects of destiny, guardians of a plan that stretched across millennia. As we consider these possibilities, the boundaries between myth and history begin to blur. The ocean kings are not merely characters in a story. They are a concept, a hypothesis, and perhaps a hidden reality waiting to be uncovered. They challenge our perception of history, suggesting that true power may have always resided not in monuments or armies, but in knowledge preserved through lineage, carried silently beneath the surface of human memory. This is the thread we will follow in our exploration of Atlantis and the forgotten prophecy. The ocean kings, once rulers of a sunken realm, may have ensured that their civilization's wisdom survived not in stone, but in blood. And as we trace their story, we begin to glimpse a civilization whose influence has subtly guided humanity from the shadows, a civilization whose legacy is not lost, but waiting to be rediscovered. Maps are more than tools for navigation. They are mirrors of knowledge, perception, and power. Throughout history, civilizations have charted the world not merely to travel, but to assert dominion, record discoveries, and encode secrets. Yet, hidden among the well-known charts of explorers and geographers, there exist maps that defy explanation. Lands appear where none should exist. Coastlines are drawn with uncanny precision, predating modern geological understanding. Some of these maps hint at continents now submerged, islands erased by the relentless march of time and tide. It is here, in the mysterious realm of forbidden cartography, that the trail of Atlantis begins to emerge. Consider the Pyre Reis map, created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer. It depicts the coastline of South America with remarkable accuracy, but also shows a landmass far to the south, resembling Antarctica, centuries before its official discovery. Scholars debate the sources of Pyre Reis information. Some suggest he relied on ancient maps passed down from forgotten mariners, perhaps even tracing back to the seafaring knowledge of the ocean kings themselves. The precision of certain depictions, the inclusion of features invisible beneath ice, implies access to records long lost to mainstream history, a knowledge preserved beyond conventional means. Or examine the Orance Fine Map of 1531, which portrays a southern continent with surprisingly accurate latitudes and coastlines that were centuries ahead of European exploration. These maps are anomalies, outliers in the historical record, but they persist, tantalizing in their precision and haunting in their implications. Could it be that the architects of these charts had access to a knowledge network designed to survive the collapse of Atlantis? Could they have drawn on a legacy encoded not just in oral tradition, but in something far older, something embedded in the bloodlines of descendants who carried memory across generations? Maps themselves are political instruments. To chart a territory is to assert ownership, to define reality for those who might follow. This makes the existence of hidden or altered maps even more significant. Some scholars propose that certain ancient maps were deliberately suppressed or altered. The knowledge of lost continents and sunken civilizations deemed too dangerous or powerful to circulate freely. A glimpse of Atlantis or its outlying islands, after all, could have revealed not only forgotten geography, but access to ancient technologies, trade routes, and resources beyond the control of empires that rose later. But cartography is not merely about land. It is about connections, networks of trade, migration, and influence. Some maps suggest intricate knowledge of ocean currents, underwater topography, and submerged coastlines. These are not the casual observations of ordinary sailors. They imply a civilization intimately familiar with the oceans, capable of predicting tides and tides' impact on coastlines, of mapping territories that now lie thousands of meters below the surface. Could these maps be the lingering echoes of the Ocean King's knowledge, passed down through generations of mariners, priests, or secret societies dedicated to preserving the wisdom of Atlantis? The mysterious Vinland map is another example, depicting parts of North America long before documented European exploration. Its authenticity remains debated, yet if genuine, it implies access to information that should have been impossible for its time. Across centuries, scattered documents, sketches, and cartographic fragments appear like breadcrumbs, pointing to a network of knowledge that mainstream history struggles to explain. And within these maps, some researchers detect subtle patterns, symbolic markers, and encoded messages, suggestions that certain locations hold significance beyond mere geography, perhaps sacred sites, repositories of knowledge, or clues to the descendants of Atlantis. Cartography, in this sense, becomes an act of memory preservation. While cities sink and monuments crumble, maps can survive, passing knowledge silently to those who know how to read between the lines. The ancient mariners, scholars, and chroniclers who compiled these maps may have been acting as custodians, bridging the lost civilization of Atlantis to future generations. Hidden in plain sight, these charts could contain encoded paths to truth if only one knows the symbols, the geometry, and the subtle hints that point to sunken realms. And yet, for every map that survives, countless others have been lost, destroyed, hidden, or erased. Wars, religious purges, and the relentless erosion of time have claimed the vast majority of these silent witnesses. It is as if history itself conspired to bury certain knowledge, allowing only fragments to escape into the hands of those few with curiosity sharp enough to notice. The challenge, then, is not merely to locate Atlantis on a map, but to interpret the intent of those who mapped the world before our time, and to uncover the secrets they encoded for survival and guidance. The forbidden maps of history speak to a reality at odds with a conventional narrative. They hint at a world far older and more complex than textbooks admit. They suggest that Atlantis may not be a single lost island, but a network of lands, cities, and maritime routes, whose memory was preserved not only in stories, but in precise visual records. And as we begin to piece together these maps with myths, genetic clues, and submerged ruins, a broader picture emerges. One that positions the Ocean Kings not only as rulers of the seas, but as architects of a hidden cartographic legacy designed to endure long after the physical collapse of their civilization. Ultimately, these maps are invitations to look deeper. They challenge us to question what we accept as reality, to explore the gaps between legend and evidence, and to consider that perhaps the world we know is only a fragment of a much larger, forgotten past. The cartographers of old, whether knowingly or unknowingly, preserved the echoes of Atlantis within their charts. And if we follow these paths carefully, reading not just the lines and coastlines, but the hidden symbols and subtleties, we may yet find ourselves tracing the routes once traveled by the Ocean Kings, venturing toward truths submerged beneath the tides of history. Stone has always been a silent witness to history. It endures where flesh and paper fade, preserving the memory of those who came before us. Across the world, from sun-scorched deserts to the depths of oceans, stones carry the echoes of civilizations long vanished, civilizations whose knowledge and power challenge our understanding of the past. In these ruins, inscriptions, and megalithic structures, fragments of Atlantis may still speak, not in words we immediately comprehend, but in symbols, geometry, and carefully hidden patterns. To read them is to listen to a language older than writing itself. Consider the submerged city of Varka, off the coast of modern India. Discovered by archaeologists and marine explorers, its stone foundations hint at a settlement far older than any recorded history. Massive blocks, precisely cut and aligned, suggest engineering knowledge that should not have existed at the time. Some theorists argue that Dvarka may have been an outpost of the same maritime civilization Plato described, a city whose rulers mastered both the seas and the art of architecture. Its ruins, slowly claimed by the waves, are more than evidence of lost geography. They may hold encoded knowledge, instructions, or warnings preserved in stone. The Yanaguni Monument in Japan presents another mystery. A series of underwater terraces, steps, and sharp angles carved into rock. It challenges conventional explanations. Was it a natural formation, as some scientists insist, or evidence of a sophisticated, sunken civilization that predated known history? Every corner of the monument suggests intentionality, a careful plan that hints at lost knowledge. Some researchers believe that the monument may have been a ceremonial site, a library of symbols meant to convey meaning across generations. The alignment of certain features with solstices and tides suggests an understanding of the cosmos far beyond the ordinary, a knowledge that may have been held by the ocean kings themselves. Moving to the lands, megalithic sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey or the stone circles of Karnak in France raise similar questions. These constructions, built thousands of years before the rise of recognized civilizations, display precision and purpose that ordinary explanations struggle to account for. Some patterns echo Atlantean symbolism, at least according to proponents of alternative history. Carvings of aquatic creatures, spirals, and concentric circles hint at cosmological understanding and maritime knowledge, suggesting a connection between distant sites that conventional archaeology cannot fully explain. Could these structures represent a scattered archive of Atlantis wisdom, encoded in stone to survive the catastrophes that submerged their cities? Even inscriptions themselves, from Sumerian cuneiform to the mysterious glyphs of the Indus Valley, present anomalies. Certain symbols, when compared across continents, bear curious similarities: spirals, wave-like patterns, and geometric forms that may convey knowledge of tides, astronomical cycles, or navigation techniques. Could these recurring motifs be evidence of a shared culture or influence tracing back to the Ocean Kings? If so, the stones themselves become not mere remnants, but vessels of memory, encoding the technological and spiritual knowledge of a civilization thought lost. Yet, stone is only part of the story. Texts, scrolls, and carvings also carry fragments of hidden knowledge. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs hint at pre-dynastic wisdom, often alluding to lands and rulers beyond conventional history. Some scholars suggest that the most enigmatic texts were intended not for the general populace, but for an inner circle, priests, navigators, or initiates entrusted with preserving knowledge that might otherwise vanish. These writings hint at sophisticated engineering, medicine, and cosmology, and occasionally reference floods, great migrations, and seaborne dynasties. Could this be the encoded memory of Atlantis' influence, surviving the millennia through careful guardianship? Archaeology also offers peculiar artifacts, strange tools, ornaments, or devices that defy conventional timelines. From stone spheres in Costa Rica to metal objects embedded in ancient rock layers, these relics suggest a level of technological sophistication that does not align with accepted history. Some theorists propose that these artifacts were not simply functional. They were symbolic, perhaps carrying encoded instructions or knowledge for future generations. Like the monuments themselves, they are puzzles left by a civilization who understood that their physical world might vanish, but their wisdom could survive if hidden cleverly enough. The hidden knowledge in stone and script is not only intellectual but esoteric. Many symbols indicate a profound understanding of energy, harmony, and the natural order. Spirals, concentric circles, and labyrinthine carvings suggest that the ocean kings were attuned to rhythms, cosmic, terrestrial, and aquatic, that ordinary civilizations overlooked. These symbols recur across continents, raising the tantalizing possibility that a shared, sunken culture once linked disparate peoples in knowledge and purpose. Stone and script, in this sense, are memory machines, preserving wisdom in a form that can endure centuries, even millennia, beneath the earth or beneath the waves. And yet, for every stone we uncover, for every inscription decoded, there are countless others lost, eroded, submerged, or hidden deliberately. Some argue that history itself conspires to bury certain truths. The remains of Atlantis, if indeed it existed, may have been deliberately fragmented, dispersed, and encoded to prevent misuse. What survives today is but a fraction, tantalizing yet incomplete, whispering secrets that demand imagination, patience, and intuition to interpret. Reading these silent witnesses requires more than the tools of conventional archaeology. It requires seeing patterns, understanding context, and considering possibilities that challenge mainstream assumptions. Each stone, each carved symbol, each megalith is a thread in a larger tapestry, one that, when woven together, reveals a civilization of profound knowledge, maritime mastery, and foresight. It is in this tapestry that we begin to discern the legacy of the ocean kings, guardians of wisdom, rulers whose influence extended far beyond the land they ruled, and even beyond the time they inhabited. In the stones and scripts of the ancient world, the echoes of Atlantis persist. They are silent, patient, waiting for those who listen carefully enough to perceive their message. The ruins may be submerged, the text scattered, but the knowledge endures. And as we continue to uncover these fragments, we are drawn closer to understanding a civilization that mastered both the seas and the secrets of survival, leaving behind not just relics, but a coded map of wisdom that challenges everything we think we know about our past. The story of Atlantis, when told in stones, scripts, and sunken cities, only scratches the surface. For the ocean kings, survival was not merely a question of geography or fortifications. It was a question of legacy. If their civilization could not withstand the fury of the oceans, if their cities were destined to sink beneath the waves, then their knowledge and identity needed a vessel that could endure the ages. That vessel, some researchers argue, was DNA itself. Imagine, for a moment, a civilization so advanced that it understood not only the workings of the world around them, but also the intricate machinery of life within. The ocean kings, according to esoteric traditions and alternative historical theories, encoded their knowledge, wisdom, and perhaps even prophecy within their own genetic material. DNA, long thought to be a mere biological blueprint, becomes a repository of memory, a living archive capable of preserving information far beyond the lifespan of any single generation. Within its sequences could lie patterns, markers, and instructions, a code designed to survive catastrophe, to endure when stone crumbled and cities sank. Modern science offers a glimpse into how such a mechanism might work. We now know that certain genetic traits are passed across generations, not just as physical characteristics, but as predispositions toward behavior, intuition, and even resilience. Epigenetics reveals that experiences can leave marks upon DNA, influencing future generations in subtle and profound ways. Could the Ocean Kings have anticipated this? Could they have designed their lineage to carry encoded knowledge, ensuring that even as Atlantis disappeared beneath the waves, fragments of its wisdom remained alive in the human gene pool? Across the world, researchers have discovered isolated populations whose genetic markers suggest unusual ancestry, lineages that do not fit neatly into the conventional map of human migration. Some of these populations also retain cultural and mythological echoes of a maritime civilization, legends of rulers from the sea, and rituals attuned to cosmic and aquatic rhythms. Could these communities be the silent carriers of Atlantean memory, living threads of a civilization that mainstream history has declared lost? The idea is not merely theoretical. Certain haplogroups, genetic sequences that trace direct ancestral lines, appear in regions corresponding to sites linked to ancient maritime cultures. From the coasts of the Mediterranean to the islands of the Indian Ocean, subtle connections emerge, links in bloodlines that may trace back to the very era Plato described. These genetic markers may carry more than lineage. They may carry encoded memory, a cryptic resonance of the knowledge and foresight that allowed the Ocean Kings to endure even after the collapse of their cities. It is within these sequences that some researchers detect what they term the DNA prophecy, the notion that Atlantis wisdom could survive encoded in the human genome, awaiting a moment in time when it might be reawakened. According to certain esoteric interpretations, the Ocean Kings understood that the survival of knowledge required more than texts or monuments. It required life itself as the vessel. Every generation, every descendant, became a living archive, a guardian of secrets buried deep in the strands of their DNA. And this raises profound questions. If fragments of Atlantis survive within our very biology, could they influence humanity today? Could the latent knowledge of navigation, engineering, medicine, or even cosmology exist quietly, waiting for discovery? Some theorists suggest that intuition, genius, or even extraordinary abilities observed in certain individuals might be expressions of this inherited memory, subtle echoes of the Ocean King's foresight manifesting across millennia. The implications are staggering. Mainstream science, rooted in empirical observation and cautious interpretation, may dismiss these ideas as speculative. Yet history is replete with instances where knowledge disappeared only to resurface centuries later. Patterns in mathematics, astronomy, and architecture echoing across generations, waiting for the right moment to be understood. If Atlantis knowledge was encoded in DNA, then the civilization never truly vanished. It became dormant, embedded within humanity itself, a hidden legacy that transcends the limitations of time, geography, and destruction. Consider the parallels in mythology. Across cultures, there are tales of chosen lineages, families imbued with wisdom, prophecy, or special insight. From the bloodlines of kings in Mesopotamia to the priestly dynasties of Egypt, certain families were believed to carry knowledge that could shape destinies. Could these myths be reflections, not of superstition, but of real genetic inheritance? The descendants of the Ocean Kings carrying encoded intelligence and foresight as part of their biological legacy? The notion of a prophecy in DNA also raises the question of purpose. Why encode knowledge in genes? Why risk leaving it dormant, dependent on the survival of descendants? The answer, according to some interpretations, lies in foresight. Atlantis was not merely a city. It was a civilization aware of its vulnerability. Its rulers may have foreseen catastrophe, the rising seas, the volcanic upheavals, the destruction of the land, and devised a method to preserve their wisdom across time. In essence, the DNA prophecy becomes a survival strategy, an insurance policy against oblivion, ensuring that the essence of Atlantis could one day be recovered. Yet accessing this knowledge is no simple task. DNA does not reveal its secrets easily. The messages are encoded in patterns, interactions, and subtle variations, requiring insight, interpretation, and sometimes intuition. For modern science, this is both a challenge and an opportunity. The tools of genomics, bioinformatics, and epigenetic research provide new ways to investigate ancestry and potential inherited traits. Meanwhile, the traditions of esoteric societies, secret lineages, and oral histories hint at knowledge of these very sequences, suggesting that those aware of the Ocean King's legacy may have preserved methods of deciphering it, passed down quietly alongside myths and rituals. The convergence of science and legend in this way is rare, yet compelling. On one side, we have empirical data, haplogroups, mutations, epigenetic markers. On the other, stories, prophecies, and symbolic traditions that echo across cultures. When these threads are woven together, a picture emerges of a civilization that transcended destruction by embedding its knowledge in life itself. Atlantis, through the Ocean Kings, may not have vanished. It may have simply transformed, existing now within the tapestry of human genetics, waiting for those who can recognize it to awaken its secrets. The DNA prophecy, then, is both a challenge and an invitation. It asks us to reconsider what survival truly means, to ponder the possibility that history is not only written in stone, sand, or scrolls, but in the strands of life itself. It is a bridge between myth and science, past and present, legend and biology. And it is a path we are only beginning to explore, a path that may eventually reveal the hidden legacy of the Ocean Kings and the civilization that dared to master both the seas and the very essence of life. The story of Atlantis is incomplete without its cataclysm, a sudden, devastating event that swallowed cities, erased civilizations, and scattered survivors across the globe. Plato describes the destruction of Atlantis as a single day and night of violent upheaval, the ground quaking, mountains collapsing, and the sea reclaiming what had once been a shining island paradise. For centuries, this narrative has been dismissed as allegory, a moral tale warning against pride and ambition. Yet, when we examine natural history, geology, and the recurring motifs of flood myths across cultures, it becomes clear that such events are not purely imaginative. They may reflect memories of real cataclysms that shaped the early human world. From the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, geologists have uncovered evidence of massive tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and sudden sea level rises occurring thousands of years ago. Submerged cities, coastal erosion, and anomalous sediment layers suggest that civilizations along the ancient shorelines experienced sudden inundations. Could these events correspond to the legendary fall of Atlantis? Perhaps the stories were not myth, but fragmented records of cataclysmic events witnessed by survivors who carried the memory across generations. These narratives became codified in myth, allegory, and ritual, preserving not only the terror of loss, but also subtle hints of vanished knowledge. Flood myths are remarkably consistent across the globe. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts the tale of Utnapishtim, who survived a divine flood that obliterated his world. In India, Manu is warned of a great deluge and guided to safety, preserving life and knowledge for the future. In Mesoamerica, the Mayans and Aztecs describe sunken lands and cataclysmic waters reshaping the earth. Even in the Old Testament, Noah's Ark carries the survivors of a global flood. Across these cultures, the details differ, yet the central motif, a sudden inundation that destroys a civilization, remains remarkably similar. Could these stories be echoes of the same event, experienced by survivors of Atlantis or other maritime kingdoms, imprinted on memory and culture as warning, preservation, and prophecy. But the sinking of Atlantis may not have been merely a single event. Some researchers propose that the collapse was gradual, the result of cumulative environmental pressures, rising seas, shifting tectonics, and climate upheavals. Perhaps the island was already in decline, its society strained by overreach, ecological imbalance, or internal conflict. The final catastrophe, then, may have been the tipping point, a natural disaster so sudden and extreme that it left little physical trace, yet etched itself into memory as a mythic apocalypse. In this framework, the story of Atlantis becomes both historical and symbolic, reflecting the fragility of civilizations in the face of overwhelming natural forces. The ocean itself, relentless and unyielding, has a role in this story beyond mere destruction. Rising tides, shifting currents, and subaqueous landslides can erase entire coastlines in centuries. Modern sonar imaging has revealed submerged terraces, stone formations, and ancient harbor structures that suggest human activity far older than we typically acknowledge. Could these ruins represent the final vestiges of Atlantis, or its colonies scattered across the seas? Each discovery hints at the possibility that the cataclysm was not total annihilation, but a dispersal, scattering survivors and their knowledge to distant lands, where it became the seed for new civilizations. Memory, both genetic and cultural, plays a crucial role in surviving catastrophe. As cities sank and records were lost, the legacy of Atlantis may have persisted in two ways: through oral traditions and through the descendants of those who survived. Stories of kings, sacred knowledge, and maritime mastery passed quietly from generation to generation, encoded not only in language, but potentially in the very DNA of those who carried it. These survivors became guardians of a civilization that no longer existed physically, preserving its wisdom in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, through intuition, ritual, and cultural memory. The notion of a cataclysm also raises questions about timing. Some alternative historians correlate the supposed fall of Atlantis with the end of the last ice age, approximately 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, a period marked by rising seas, melting glaciers, and massive shifts in global climate. This was a time of profound ecological upheaval, when coastlines transformed dramatically and previously habitable regions vanished beneath the waves. It is plausible that if Atlantis existed, it succumbed to these forces, its population dispersed, and its cities submerged, leaving behind a record that was encoded in memory, myth, and the very genetic fabric of its survivors. Yet, the story of the sinking is not merely one of loss. Embedded within the catastrophe is a warning, a lesson for future generations. The survivors carried forward knowledge of survival, adaptation, and the fragility of human achievement. Their descendants, perhaps unknowingly, preserved the techniques, wisdom, and rituals necessary to endure environmental change and societal collapse. In this way, the cataclysm of Atlantis becomes both a tragedy and a legacy, a mechanism through which ancient knowledge could persist despite the destruction of the physical city. The echoes of this event resonate even today. Modern discoveries of submerged structures, anomalous geological formations, and mysterious artifacts suggest that the oceans have not fully relinquished their secrets. Each sonar scan, each dive into deep waters, may reveal not only the remains of lost cities, but the traces of civilization, knowledge, and culture that the cataclysm could not entirely erase. The sinking of Atlantis, once thought purely allegorical, may instead represent the enduring tension between human achievement and the forces of nature, a tension that continues to shape the world around us. In contemplating the cataclysm, we begin to understand the duality of Atlantis' story: destruction and survival, loss and preservation, myth, and memory. The ocean kings may have been swept from their thrones, their cities reduced to rubble beneath the waves, yet the essence of their civilization, its wisdom, its knowledge, and perhaps its prophecy, endured. The story of the sinking is not merely a tale of death. It is a testament to resilience, to the foresight of those who understood that even when the land is gone, memory, myth, and a legacy of life itself can survive. Atlantis, even in its legendary state, is often imagined as a city of unparalleled beauty and wealth. But beyond its splendor, it may have possessed knowledge and technology so advanced that it still challenges the limits of our imagination. Ancient texts and esoteric traditions hint at devices and innovations that surpass the capabilities of known civilizations. The Ocean Kings, it is said, were not merely rulers. They were engineers, scientists, and visionaries, masters of forces that later humanity would struggle to rediscover. Their wisdom, encoded in artifacts, architecture, and even myths, hints at a civilization that understood the natural world on a level that modern science is only beginning to approach. Consider the descriptions of Atlantean cities as told by Plato, concentric rings of water and land, connected by bridges and canals, perfectly aligned with astronomical phenomena. Such planning suggests knowledge not only of civil engineering, but also of astronomy, hydraulics, and geomancy, a science of harmony between human constructions and the environment. Could it be that the Ocean Kings developed engineering techniques that allowed them to manipulate water, harness energy, and maintain urban centers that thrived amid the challenges of oceanic life? Modern architects and engineers can scarcely replicate the precision described, which raises the question, were these accounts exaggeration or glimpses of forgotten technology? Legends speak of energy sources unlike anything recorded elsewhere in antiquity. Some esoteric texts hint at crystals or other conduits capable of storing and releasing power. Others describe mechanisms that could amplify sound, light, or motion, machines that suggest knowledge of physics and resonance far ahead of its time. Whether these accounts are metaphorical or literal remains a matter of debate, but their persistence across different traditions implies that the ancients recognized a level of technological sophistication that was extraordinary, even by today's standards. Atlantean mastery may have extended beyond the purely mechanical. Navigational prowess, for instance, was reportedly unparalleled. The Ocean Kings ruled seas far beyond their immediate territories, mastering ocean currents, tides, and the movements of celestial bodies with uncanny precision. Maps, compasses, and other navigational aids attributed to this era, some of which survive indirectly through later civilizations, hint at a knowledge system designed to transcend ordinary human experience. It is as if the Ocean Kings had charted not just the geography of the Earth, but its hidden rhythms and patterns, a cosmic map integrated with the seas. Some researchers argue that Atlantean knowledge was deliberately encoded to survive cataclysm and loss. It appears in artifacts, megalithic structures, and even ritual practices scattered across the world. These remnants, when studied carefully, suggest a civilization capable of sophisticated mathematics, astronomy, and architecture, with symbolic systems designed to preserve wisdom even when physical structures could not. Could Atlantis' technological secrets have been embedded in its monuments and ceremonies as a means of survival, a coded message for those who would inherit its legacy? Certain artifacts hint at capabilities that seem almost magical to modern eyes. From intricate metallic objects buried in ancient strata to enigmatic devices carved in stone, there is evidence suggesting that Atlantean knowledge may have included advanced metallurgy, energy manipulation, or even mechanical computation. While mainstream science struggles to explain these anomalies, esoteric researchers posit that these are fragments of a technological tradition designed to harness natural forces with precision and sophistication. knowledge lost to conventional history, but potentially retrievable through careful study. Atlantean medicine and healing also appear to have been highly advanced. Ancient texts and oral traditions speak of treatments, herbal preparations, and techniques that promoted longevity, vitality, and even enhanced cognitive abilities. Some speculate that these practices were closely guarded by the priestly classes of Atlantis, passed down through select lineages, perhaps another thread connecting the Ocean Kings' technological mastery to their genetic legacy. The combination of engineering, energy manipulation, navigation, and healing suggests a civilization that sought mastery not merely over the physical world, but over life itself. Yet, for all their achievements, the Ocean Kings faced the ultimate challenge: survival in the face of catastrophe. Their technology may have been formidable, but it was no match for the cataclysm that swallowed Atlantis beneath the waves. And yet, the fact that myths, relics, and subtle traces of their innovation persist suggests that their knowledge was never entirely lost. Some elements of Atlantean technology may have been deliberately preserved, encoded in myths, architecture, and secret teachings, awaiting a time when humanity would be ready or curious enough to rediscover it. This technological legacy is inseparable from the idea of preservation through lineage. As we explored earlier, the DNA prophecy may have served as a vehicle for survival, carrying knowledge that could not be encoded in stone or metal. The Ocean Kings appear to have understood the limitations of physical infrastructure. Buildings crumble, machines rust, and manuscripts decay. But life, encoded in genetic sequences, endures. Their mastery of both the material and biological realms ensured that even when the ocean reclaimed their cities, fragments of their genius survived, ready to resurface in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Atlantean technology, therefore, is more than the sum of its artifacts. It represents a philosophy of knowledge, a method of preserving understanding against the ravages of time and disaster. It is a testament to human ingenuity, foresight, and ambition, a civilization that sought to harmonize with the world while mastering it. The Ocean Kings were not mere rulers. They were custodians of a wisdom designed to endure. And in the remnants scattered across continents, in the myths passed through generations, and perhaps even within the DNA of their descendants, their knowledge quietly persists, waiting for those who can recognize its patterns and unlock its secrets. The memory of a great flood appears in nearly every ancient culture, as if humanity collectively witnessed something so devastating that its echo survived across continents and millennia. But when we return to the scientific evidence, the sediment cores, meltwater pulses, ocean floor anomalies, and unexplained shifts in Earth's climate, we begin to see a picture far more intricate than the simple story of water rising. It becomes a geological crime scene, and at the center of that crime is the event many believe shattered the world of the Ocean Kings: the sudden, catastrophic ending of Atlantis. Modern geology identifies a series of near-instant ocean level surges at the end of the last ice age, moments where the Earth's waters rose violently rather than gradually. The most famous is the Younger Dryas event, an abrupt cooling around 12,900 years ago, followed by a rapid warming period approximately 1,200 years later. In those turbulent centuries, glaciers melted at unprecedented speed, sea levels rose hundreds of feet, and entire coastlines were swallowed by the ocean. Cities or settlements built along those coasts, especially advanced maritime civilizations, would have disappeared almost overnight. Yet the pattern of destruction raises more questions than it answers. If the Younger Dryas was merely the result of natural glacial cycles, why do so many underwater structures across the globe date to this same epoch? The Yanagani Monument off Japan, with its geometric steps and right angles. The Bimini Road near the Bahamas, a series of megalithic blocks arranged in straight lines. the submerged ruins off the coast of Malta, and the underwater cities of the Gulf of Kambat in India all appear to have been swallowed by sudden sea level rise around the same period. This is not the quiet sinking of erosion or tectonic subduction. These sites look as if the ocean simply devoured them. This abruptness lends credibility to the theory that an advanced maritime culture, Atlantis or something analogous, may have fallen victim to one or more rapid cataclysms, events too sudden for any society to fully prepare for. But some researchers argue that the flood was not solely a natural disaster. They propose an internal fracture within the Ocean King's civilization, a conflict between two factions, one aligned with natural cycles and preservation, the other pursuing unchecked use of energy technologies that destabilized the planet's climate. Ancient texts hint at such a schism. Plato describes Atlantis as wealthy yet spiritually decaying, corrupted by power and greed. Hindu epics speak of great wars fought with weapons capable of evaporating oceans. The Egyptian priesthoods spoke of earlier civilizations destroyed by their own hubris before Egypt was even born. These may not be literal descriptions of superweapons, but rather encoded memories of ecological or energetic misuse, systems that may have amplified natural disasters into existential cataclysms. Meanwhile, geological evidence offers disturbing parallels. Some meltwater pulses, particularly Meltwater Pulse 1A, show sea levels rising up to 50 feet in just a few centuries, far too rapidly for natural melting alone. Such dramatic change could have been triggered by destabilized ice sheets collapsing in chain reactions. Was this purely climate-driven? Perhaps. But if a highly advanced maritime culture manipulated energy sources linked to Earth's natural systems, their errors might have accelerated processes already near a tipping point. Evidence from Greenland ice cores reveals sudden spikes of soot and dust at the end of the Pleistocene, indicating massive wildfires or atmospheric disruptions. Curiously, these layers appear worldwide, hinting at either an extraterrestrial impact or a global-scale disaster. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes a comet or fragmented meteor collided with ice sheets, causing instant melting, floods, and climate fluctuations. Whether this impact was a random cosmic strike or an event intertwined with the Ocean King's downfall remains open to interpretation. If Atlantis truly existed, it may not have been a single island, but a collection of interconnected coastal cities operating as a unified maritime network. The destruction of this network would leave behind scattered fragments, sunken harbors, broken temples, and stone complexes now lying silently on ocean floors. Archaeologists today repeatedly find such fragments, often older than accepted timelines allow. Each discovery challenges mainstream narratives and suggests a forgotten chapter of history, abruptly erased. And then there is the curious pattern of survival. After the Flood era, the world's earliest civilizations, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, ancient China, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, bringing sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, canals, irrigation, and mathematics. It is as if groups of survivors from a lost maritime culture intentionally seeded these societies. The legends of bearded water gods arriving after cataclysms, Viracocha in the Andes, Oannes in Mesopotamia, Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, reinforce the idea of a knowledgeable remnant emerging from the sea to rebuild what was lost. Mainstream scholars dismiss these tales as mythology. Yet their worldwide consistency suggests something more. Why do these figures appear shortly after the Great Floods? Why do they arrive from the ocean with knowledge rather than weapons? Why do they instruct humanity on agriculture, architecture, star tracking, and moral systems? These are the behaviors of refugees, not gods, survivors carrying fragments of a much older heritage. Geologists studying submerged coastlines now estimate that up to 20 million square kilometers of habitable land were lost between 14,000 and 7,000 BCE. If major populations lived near the water, as most advanced maritime cultures would, they would have vanished from history almost instantly. No wonder our ancient record feels like it begins abruptly. The earlier chapters are simply underwater. When the flood myths describe the world tilting, the sky darkening, or the oceans rising without rain, they likely encode memories of earth-shaking events, crustal displacement, sudden glacial collapse, or meteoric impacts. These descriptions match what geology tells us about rapid climatic transitions. If the ocean kings foresaw such destruction, perhaps through astronomical knowledge, they may have attempted to preserve their wisdom through stone structures, DNA encoding, or initiation schools scattered across continents. But perhaps the most unsettling idea is that the flood was not an accident at all. Some researchers speculate that the ocean kings themselves triggered the destruction, intentionally or unintentionally, through the misuse of oceanic or crystalline energy systems. If their technology resonated with Earth's electromagnetic grid, a miscalculation could have amplified natural forces beyond control. This theory aligns with stories of Atlantis disappearing in a single day and night of misfortune, as Plato wrote, and with the global collapse markers seen in geological records. In this view, the flood becomes more than a natural disaster. It becomes a civilizational reset, a moment where knowledge and power exceeded wisdom. The earth, overwhelmed, reclaimed the coasts, the temples, the shipyards, and the shining cities of the ocean kings, burying them beneath layers of sediment and salt water. Yet the legacy of those lost people did not vanish entirely. It survived in myths, in unexpected bursts of ancient knowledge, in impossible maps showing Antarctica before it froze, and perhaps even in the strange genetic markers now appearing in modern research. The flood may have destroyed their world, but it did not destroy their memory. Instead, it scattered their story across the planet, waiting for future generations to piece together the truth. And now, as the oceans warm again and ancient DNA anomalies emerge in scientific databases, it seems the past is resurfacing, not metaphorically, but literally. The lost world of the ocean kings may be rising from its watery grave, one discovery at a time. Long before satellites, GPS, and modern cartography, ancient mariners carried maps that by all logic should not exist. They charted coastlines that were supposedly unknown, depicted mountains and rivers buried under ice for thousands of years, and displayed a level of geographic precision no early civilization was thought capable of achieving. When we examine these maps through the lens of the ocean kings, a startling possibility emerges. These were not inventions of medieval sailors or imaginative artists. They may have been inherited knowledge, fragments of a far older mapping tradition, one that could trace back to the maritime network of Atlantis. One of the most mysterious cases is the Piri-Reis map of 1513, drawn by an Ottoman admiral who openly admitted his sources included ancient charts from before the flood. On this map, the coast of South America is drawn with striking accuracy. Yet the most haunting detail lies at its southern edge, where a landmass resembling Antarctica appears free of ice. Modern science believes Antarctica has been frozen for at least 6,000 years, possibly much longer. So how did a map created in the 1500s show an ice-free coastline? The simplest explanation is that Piri-Reis was copying from much older material, maps preserved through civilizations that inherited knowledge from the ocean kings. But the Piri-Reis map is not alone. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531 depicts Antarctica with rivers, valleys, and mountain ranges beneath the ice, features that would not be confirmed until the invention of ice-penetrating radar in the 20th century. This raises a troubling possibility. The mapmakers of the past did not create these maps. They preserved them. If so, then a global mapping tradition existed long before recorded history, one capable of surveying coastlines with precision comparable to modern tools. Another clue lies in medieval portolan charts, those beautiful, web-like maps of the Mediterranean in Black Sea covered in radiating compass lines. Historians struggle to explain their sudden appearance, fully formed, with no record of development. They are too accurate for trial-and-error navigation and seem to rely on mathematical principles lost to the cultures that supposedly created them. Many portolan charts align with star routes rather than coastlines, suggesting a celestial navigation system reminiscent of Polynesian stick charts. Primitive-looking yet incredibly sophisticated tools used to track currents, swells, and star paths across the vast Pacific. What links all these mapping anomalies is a single underlying theme: knowledge appearing fully developed, as if inherited from a forgotten master culture. The Ocean Kings, said to be unparalleled navigators, would have needed precise world maps to maintain their network of coastal cities and trade routes. Their empire, if it existed, was oceanic, not continental. Its power lay in currents, winds, and celestial alignments, not in armies. Such a civilization would have mapped the seas with extraordinary care, creating a body of knowledge that later civilizations only glimpsed through fragments. The idea becomes more convincing when we examine early legends linking the sea with forbidden knowledge. In Mesopotamia, Oannes, the fishman teacher, emerged from the ocean carrying the secrets of measurement. In Polynesia, the hero Maui lifted islands from the sea using a magic hook, interpreted by some as a metaphor for discovering land with an ancient map. Even the Greeks attributed their earliest navigation skills to the mysterious Atlantean-descended Phoenicians. These stories paint a picture of the sea as the source of enlightenment, a place where knowledge was stored, not lost. One of the most striking mysteries appears in the From Morrow map from the 1400s, where the Indian Ocean is shown open, not landlocked as medieval scholars believed. From Morrow described his sources as ancient mariners from beyond memory, and insisted African circumnavigation was performed by a forgotten culture capable of long-distance voyages centuries before European explorers attempted them. He seemed to be hinting at a civilization predating recorded history, one whose reach extended across oceans long before classical antiquity. But perhaps the most compelling evidence of an Atlantean mapping legacy lies not in drawn maps, but in encoded navigation systems. Many ancient cultures used geometric alignments, star paths, and angular measurements that appear suspiciously advanced. The Nazca lines, for example, from above, look like a vast navigational grid, a map not of land but of sky routes. The Dogon people of Mali hold astronomical knowledge about Sirius long before telescopes existed. The megalithic sites of Europe align with solstices and lunar cycles, functioning almost like GPS nodes in an ancient stone network. These alignments form what some researchers call the global sacred grid, a web of ancient sites linked by geometric angles, great circle distances, and astronomical points. When plotted on modern tools, the pattern resembles a planetary navigation system, too consistent to be accidental. If the Ocean Kings had indeed created a worldwide mapping tradition, it would make sense that they encoded it into their monuments, ensuring the knowledge survived even if their primary maps were lost to the sea. Another mystery comes from island cultures. The Polynesians navigated the Pacific using techniques so subtle and profound that modern sailors struggle to comprehend them. They tracked the movements of stars, the taste of currents, the behavior of birds, and even the reflection of distant islands on clouds. Genetic studies indicate Polynesians may have connections with unexpected regions, including South America, suggesting transoceanic contact long before European explorers. These navigators may have preserved fragments of the Ocean Kings' mapping traditions in oral form, long after the physical maps disappeared. Indian Ocean cultures, too, carry hints. Old Tamil texts describe fleets capable of crossing the entire world ocean, guided by star charts said to be inherited from ancient ancestors. Similar claims appear in Javanese and Malagasy legends. The patterns are global, not isolated, implying that long-distance maritime travel was not the exception in prehistory. It was a norm for certain civilizations. This idea challenges everything modern archaeology assumes. If a sophisticated map-making tradition existed thousands of years earlier than expected, it implies that at least one global culture possessed knowledge we associate with the classical and medieval eras, if not modern times. And if that culture was destroyed in the floods, the surviving fragments of its maps would look exactly like what we find today. Enigmatic documents passed between civilizations, poorly understood yet strangely accurate. Emerging evidence from ocean floor surveys adds to the controversy. Beneath the silt of continental shelves lie structures arranged with geometric precision, often aligned to ancient coastlines exactly where these mysterious maps show land masses and ports. As sea levels rose, these ancient cartographers may have meticulously charted the creeping shorelines, documenting the loss of their world even as it slipped beneath the waves. Their maps, copied and recopied through thousands of years, eventually reached Renaissance Europe and early explorers, stripped of context but not of truth. The deeper question is this: how did the ocean kings create such maps? Without satellites, without aviation, without modern science, how could they chart coastlines to near-modern accuracy? One theory suggests they used long-distance triangulation aided by astronomical observations. Another proposes the use of elevated aerial platforms, perhaps giant kites, balloons, or early glider systems, long forgotten. Yet a more esoteric theory claims they possessed crystal lenses capable of magnification far beyond known ancient tools. Some relics found in ancient Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean hint at optics far more advanced than historical timelines allow. Whatever their methods, the consistency across unrelated cultures implies communication. These maps were not local. They were shared. A global maritime network must have existed, one advanced enough to exchange geographic knowledge across oceans. And as the world drowned during the floods, the survivors clung to what little they could carry. Fragments of maps, slivers of memory, pieces of a world vanishing beneath the rising waters. Today, when historians examine ancient maps that shouldn't exist, they often label the anomalies as coincidence. But taken together, these maps form a mosaic, a silent testament to a forgotten civilization's mastery of the oceans. The ocean kings may be long gone, their cities lost to the deep. But their vision of the world remains inked on parchment, etched in stone, and whispered through the navigational traditions of distant cultures. Their maps have outlived their empire, guiding us not across the seas, but back into the depths of our forgotten past. Across the world's oceans, beneath layers of silt, coral, and forgotten time, lie artifacts that stubbornly defy mainstream explanations. These objects whisper of a civilization that mastered stone, metal, navigation, and symbolism far beyond what historians believe possible for ancient cultures. For those who follow the trail of the ocean kings, these artifacts are more than archaeological curiosities. They are physical fingerprints of a lost maritime royalty whose knowledge dissolved into the sea after the great floods. Their cities may be gone, but the remnants of their tools, metals, and sculptures persist like ghosts, awaiting rediscovery. One of the most striking clues surfaced off the coast of Sicily in 2015 when divers recovered dozens of metallic ingots from a shipwreck dated to around 600 BCE. What shocked researchers was the composition, a copper-zinc alloy closely matching the ancient descriptions of orichalcum, the legendary metal of Atlantis described by Plato. Orichalcum was said to adorn the walls of the central temple of Atlantis, gleaming with a reddish-golden light. Scholars long dismissed it as myth. Yet here it was, real, alloyed with a knowledge of metallurgy that shouldn't have existed so early. The question lingered. Were these ingots remnants of a lost metallurgical tradition preserved by later civilizations? Or were they evidence of an ongoing trade of rare metals between Mediterranean cultures and a far older source that no longer exists? Even more perplexing are the underwater structures near Malta, resting on seabeds, now 20 meters below the surface. These megalithic remains appear to be extensions of Malta's famous prehistoric temples, whose construction dates stretch back beyond 5000 BCE. Some of the submerged stones weigh several tons, arranged in circular or semicircular layouts. Their craftsmanship hints at a culture intimately familiar with geometry, astronomy, and stone alignment. Yet the sea swallowed these structures long before recorded Maltese history. If these architects belonged to the ocean kings, their temples may have served as maritime markers, waypoints for ancient sailors navigating an interconnected world of ports now hidden beneath Mediterranean waters. Halfway around the world, in Lake Titicaca of the Andes, divers have uncovered carved stones, monoliths, and what appears to be the base of an ancient temple. Some stones feature intricate spirals, triton shell motifs, and stylized marine imagery, odd symbols for a culture living at the highest navigable lake on Earth. Local legends speak of Viracocha, a water deity who emerged from the lake to teach humanity knowledge and order. Could this site be the memory of a relocated Atlantean group, rebuilding after the floods at a high-altitude refuge where rising seas could no longer reach them? The triton-shaped stones are especially curious. Nearly identical motifs appear in Minoan art, Sumerian engravings, and Indus Valley seals, suggesting an unexpected cultural bridge connecting civilizations separated by oceans and continents. Among the most mysterious relics are the so-called blue-eyed statues scattered across coastal regions of the ancient Near East, sites in Lebanon, Syria, and Cyprus. These statues depict figures with exaggerated bright blue or turquoise inlaid eyes, often with maritime objects such as shells or fish motifs. Some statues appear almost identical despite being found thousands of kilometers apart. Why this fixation on blue eyes? And why do these figures appear in port cities or ancient harbor towns? Some researchers believe these statues may represent a noble or priestly class among the ocean kings, individuals with a distinctive genetic lineage. Their striking blue eyes, preserved in stone, may symbolize a trait carried by a maritime elite whose descendants scattered across the Mediterranean after their homeland vanished. Artifacts from India's Gulf of Kumbat add another dimension to this puzzle. Here, sonar surveys and dredged materials reveal pottery shards, worked stones, and geometric patterns dating to periods far older than the Indus Valley civilization. If these findings are genuine, and controversy surrounds them, they may point to a pre-flood civilization capable of constructing large coastal settlements long before the accepted timeline for urban development in South Asia. The sudden submergence of these sites aligns with global sea level rises at the end of the Pleistocene, hinting again at the destruction of coastal cultures tied to advanced maritime knowledge. On the Japanese island of Yonaguni, divers discovered a massive underwater structure composed of flat surfaces, stair-like terraces, and straight-edge platforms. Debate rages over whether it is natural or artificial. Nature can carve straight lines. Nature can shape steps. But nature rarely shapes both in a single formation with such coherence that it resembles a half-buried ceremonial complex. If the Yonaguni structure is artificial, it dates to a time when this region was above sea level, around 10,000 years ago. That places its construction during or just after the collapse of the Ice Age, when the Ocean King civilization might have been at its height or on the brink of destruction. Even more compelling are the polished, precision-cut stones scattered across underwater platforms near Micronesia. Nan Madol, often called the Venice of the Pacific, is a massive complex of basalt structures built on coral platforms. While Nan Madol itself is not underwater, nearby regions show signs of submerged ruins far older than the main site. Local legends claim Nan Madol was constructed by the people of the sea, who used magic to move stones weighing multiple tons. This echoes stories from Egypt, Malta, and the Andes, where stoneworking techniques seemed disproportionate to the tools available at the time. Perhaps what appears as magic was simply the surviving memory of a technology inherited from a vanished master culture, one that understood acoustics, buoyancy, or crystalline resonance in ways we no longer do. Occasionally, artifacts appear that are so anomalous they threaten to rewrite entire timelines. One such object is the so-called Cosquer Cave art, found in an underwater cave near Marseille. The artwork inside includes depictions of marine animals rarely associated with European Stone Age art: seals, penguin-like birds, and fish species that suggest either advanced coastal observation or a society intimately connected with the sea. The cave lies more than 100 feet underwater today, meaning its artists lived in an age when the coastline stretched far further out and when sea levels had not yet engulfed their world. The people who made those paintings may have been contemporaries or descendants of the ocean kings, recording ocean life with the same reverence that desert cultures later gave to stars and sand. Another enigmatic category of evidence comes from tools and mechanisms that seem technologically out of place. The Antikythera mechanism, though much younger than Atlantis, is an example of a highly advanced device appearing abruptly in the historical record. If such knowledge could be preserved and transmitted long after its creators vanished, then it stands to reason that earlier, now-lost mechanisms might have existed in the hands of the ocean kings, tools capable of navigation, celestial calculations, or energy harmonics. Symbolic artifacts provide equally haunting clues. Spirals, concentric circles, and wave patterns appear across artifacts from Ireland to Peru, from Australia to Crete. They often depict not random decoration, but something methodical: currents, vortices, celestial spirals, or energy flows. Some scholars propose that these symbols encode navigation pathways used by ancient mariners. Others believe they represent portals, transformations, or memory storage in artistic form. Whatever their meaning, their spread across disparate cultures implies the existence of a shared symbolic language, inherited from a common source. But perhaps the most compelling artifacts are not those already found, but those yet to be discovered. Oceanographers estimate that more than 90% of the world's ancient coastlines lie underwater today. These submerged regions hold the true archaeological record of early humanity, a record rapidly being revealed by sonar scans, deep-sea robotics, and advanced imaging technologies. As these tools improve, more anomalies emerge: walls, terraces, standing stones, and structures eerily similar to those found on land. Each new discovery adds weight to the possibility that a grand civilization once flourished where the seas now dominate. For mainstream archaeology, these findings are inconvenient. They lack context, appear out of sequence, or contradict accepted timelines. Yet for those who follow the trail of the ocean kings, these artifacts form a coherent mosaic. They represent the leftovers of a world that mastered travel, stone, metal, and celestial knowledge, a world shattered by the floods, but not entirely erased. The relics of the ocean kings do not scream for attention. They whisper in silent underwater temples, in statues with unnatural blue eyes, in metals once thought mythical. They speak of a lost lineage that shaped early humanity. These artifacts are not proof in the conventional sense. They are breadcrumbs, leading back to a civilization whose existence challenges everything we believe about the ancient world. And as each new artifact emerges from the deep, the picture grows clearer. The ocean kings may have vanished, but their legacy endures, in stone, in metal, in myth, and perhaps even in our DNA. Throughout history, certain ideas have a strange way of disappearing, not because they were disproven, but because they were discouraged. The story of the ocean kings and the possibility of an advanced pre-flood civilization is one such idea. Whenever scholars, explorers, or linguists got too close to uncovering inconvenient truths, they were met with ridicule, professional exile, or the quiet erasure of their work. This pattern repeats across centuries, forming a shadowy trail of silent scholars who dare to suggest that humanity's past is older, stranger, and more interconnected than textbooks allow. The suppression does not always appear dramatic. There are no torches or burning libraries. Instead, it is subtle. Funding quietly withdrawn, research reclassified as fringe, publications rejected without review, or whole careers stalled because a researcher dared to step outside comfortable narratives. Yet when we gather the stories of these suppressed voices, a chilling pattern emerges. It suggests that for thousands of years, institutions, religious, political, and academic, have been invested in maintaining a carefully limited version of human history. One of the earliest victims of this suppression was Solon, the Greek lawmaker whose journey to Egypt inspired Plato's writings on Atlantis. The Egyptian priests told him of an ancient maritime empire destroyed by floods long before Greek civilization existed. Solon intended to write down the full account, but his work mysteriously vanished. Only fragments, filtered through Plato, survived. Many scholars believe Solon's original manuscripts were deliberately removed from the public sphere, too disruptive, too dangerous, too contradictory to the emerging philosophies of the ancient world. Centuries later, the Roman geographer Pomponius Mela wrote of islands in the Atlantic once inhabited by a vanished race of seafarers. His writings were copied selectively during the Middle Ages, with entire sections missing from surviving manuscripts. Similarly, the mysterious Book of the Constellations from Arab astronomers, which referenced ancient star maps inherited from pre-flood cultures, vanished from the historical record. Fragments suggest the book described movements of stars as observed by a maritime civilization in a time when sea levels were vastly lower. In the Middle Ages, certain monastic orders preserved stories of antediluvian kings who traveled the seas and built structures later mistaken for natural formations. But when the Church sought to unify doctrine, many of these accounts were labeled heretical. Chronicles referencing lost world epics were rewritten, sometimes erased entirely. The Church did not necessarily fear the truth. It feared the loss of control. A world with an older civilization hinted that humanity's spiritual guidance predated organized religion. The Renaissance, a time we now consider an explosion of knowledge, was also an era of strategic censorship. Cartographers who included anomalous landmasses or ice-free polar regions faced accusations of fraud. Historians who suggested that ancient mariners circumnavigated the globe before Columbus were dismissed as dreamers. Some were stripped of their positions. The reason was simple. European empires relied on the claim that they were the first to explore the world. Any evidence of earlier global navigation threatened political legitimacy. Moving into the 18th and 19th centuries, explorers discovered ruins in the Americas, Pacific, and Mediterranean that far exceeded expected timelines. But whenever someone proposed that these ruins might belong to a lost maritime civilization, academic institutions reacted with disdain. The case of Augustus Luplongeon is a haunting example. After extensive work in the Yucatan, he concluded the Maya possessed knowledge inherited from a mother civilization across the ocean. Despite producing photographs, architectural drawings, and translations, he was labeled a pseudo-archaeologist. His work was buried, literally and figuratively, by scholars who refused to accept any cross-oceanic contact before Columbus. Another silenced voice was Colonel James Churchward, who wrote extensively about a lost civilization he called Mu. His theories were dismissed as fantasy, despite compelling patterns he uncovered in Pacific mythology, megalithic architecture, and genetic similarities among distant island populations. While Churchward may have lacked perfect evidence, the aggressive nature of the pushback suggests more than simple disagreement. It suggests fear. Fear that acknowledging global contact before established historical timelines would unravel the foundations of multiple academic disciplines. In the 20th century, the suppression grew more systematic. Universities became gatekeepers of approved knowledge. Funding bodies dictated what questions could be safely explored. Careers were built not on challenging paradigms, but on reinforcing them. When researchers presented anomalies, underwater ruins, ancient maps showing impossible coastlines, genetic markers connecting distant populations, they were advised to reinterpret findings in ways that fit accepted models. Those who refused often found themselves without grants, without publications, without tenure. One of the most striking examples is the case of Jacques Spurtle, a geneticist who studied Polynesian DNA. His research suggested the presence of ancient, non-Asian haplogroups in Pacific Island populations, implying contact with a population older than any known coastal culture. His findings were quietly shelved, his career diverted away from controversial areas. Another example is Dr. Orizio Santos, who dedicated decades to studying geological, linguistic, and mythological evidence for Atlantis in the Indian Ocean. His work was largely ignored in academic circles despite meticulous cross-disciplinary analysis. Even in modern times, researchers investigating underwater ruins often face resistance. When sonar teams mapped structures off the coast of Cuba in the early 2000s, structures with geometric patterns at depths too deep for known ancient settlements, media coverage briefly surged. Then the story vanished. Access to the site became restricted, and further explorations were quietly halted. Official explanations cited funding issues, but insiders whispered of political sensitivities. A discovery of that magnitude would force nations to reconsider their histories and their claimed cultural origins. The suppression extends beyond academia. Museums around the world hold artifacts that do not fit conventional timelines, stored away in basements, mislabeled, or unclassified. Some of these artifacts show technological skill beyond what is attributed to the cultures they are assigned to. Others display unknown symbols or materials that hint at cross-oceanic connections. Curators rarely mention these anomalies publicly. Doing so invites controversy that institutions prefer to avoid. But perhaps the most subtle form of suppression is ridicule. Somewhere along the line, questioning ancient history became equated with pseudoscience. Asking whether humanity once possessed advanced maritime capabilities became taboo. This social pressure discourages critical thinking more effectively than any formal censorship. People fear being mocked, so they stop asking questions. Scholars fear losing credibility, so they defend established timelines even when evidence contradicts them. Why does this oppression persist? Part of the answer lies in the inertia of established systems. Academic fields are built on assumptions. If those assumptions collapse, entire careers, textbooks, and institutions must be rewritten. Another reason is ideological. Some belief systems and national identities depend on specific historical narratives. The idea of a global pre-flood civilization challenges these narratives profoundly. And there is a deeper, more unsettling possibility. Perhaps fragments of Atlantean knowledge did survive into later societies, but only within select groups. Mystery schools, secret brotherhoods, and esoteric orders have long claimed to possess ancient wisdom from before the Great Floods. Their rituals, symbols, and cosmologies often echo the imagery of water, stars, and lost golden ages. If such groups exist, they may have quietly influenced what information enters mainstream history and what remains hidden. The silencing of scholars who come close to revealing the world of the Ocean Kings is not always malicious. Sometimes it is simply the inertia of disbelief. Other times it is institutional self-preservation. But whatever the motive, the result is the same. The truth about humanity's ancient past remains fragmented, distorted, or buried beneath professional caution. Yet the pattern also tells us something important. If so many thinkers across so many years were discouraged from exploring the same idea, a lost maritime civilization predating known history, then perhaps that idea holds more truth than we realize. Suppression, paradoxically, becomes evidence. Each silenced voice becomes another clue pointing toward a forgotten chapter of humanity's story, one that waits beneath the ocean, beneath the archives, beneath the veneer of official history. As more artifacts emerge from the deep, as genetic data becomes harder to ignore, and as global myths converge into a single narrative, the silence surrounding these scholars begins to crack. The Ocean Kings may have been forgotten by institutions, but not by time. Their legacy continues to rise, piece by piece, from the depths of history. In recent decades, a quiet revolution has begun beneath the surface of mainstream science, an unexpected alliance between geneticists, marine archaeologists, and atmospheric researchers. They are not driven by myth or speculation, but by hard data that simply refuses to fit inside accepted historical timelines. And strangely, almost all of this emerging evidence points toward a single, converging conclusion. Sometime before 10,000 BCE, humanity was not scattered and primitive, but connected, coordinated, and far more advanced than we have ever acknowledged. This is where the lost Ocean Kings re-emerge, not as legends, but as a plausible ancestral force hidden within our DNA. It starts with an anomaly. Geneticists studying ancient human lineages stumbled upon mitochondrial markers that do not map neatly onto migratory paths taught in textbooks. These markers appear suddenly, showing a level of diversity that suggests not a slow spread of small tribes, but a widespread, organized population that interacted across long distances. One haplogroup in particular, informally referred to by researchers as lineage XC, has been found in populations separated by vast oceans, groups that, according to mainstream history, had no contact until thousands of years later. This lineage appears off the coast of Europe, in isolated pockets of the Americas, along North African shores, and in scattered island populations in the Pacific. Some researchers quietly proposed that an ancient seafaring civilization may have dispersed this lineage long before the rise of Mesopotamia or Egypt. Their papers were rejected or never published. The idea was too disruptive. Yet the data remained, growing stronger with each new sample. When advanced genetic sequencing became widely accessible, citizen scientists also began noticing irregular patterns. Markers that hinted at a human population bottleneck far more severe than the last glacial maximum should have caused. Something catastrophic happened to humanity, something powerful enough to erase entire lineages and leave only echoes of a once thriving genetic diversity. This bottleneck corresponds eerily with global flood legends, which appear on every continent and in every ancient culture. The Ocean Kings, if they existed, may have been among the lost. Meanwhile, deep-sea archaeologists have been mapping the ocean floor with technologies that reveal structures buried beneath sediments for thousands of years. These structures are not simple formations. They exhibit geometry, right angles, repeating patterns, and orientations aligned with stars as they appeared over 12,000 years ago. Off the coast of India, divers discovered immense stone blocks forming what appears to be a submerged urban district, complete with water channels and plaza-like clearings. Radiocarbon tests of nearby organic material suggest an age older than any known human city. Further west, near the Azores, sonar scans revealed symmetrical terraces stretching along underwater ridges. Early attempts to explore the area were halted by dangerous currents and sudden political restrictions. Official statements claimed the formations were natural basaltic features, yet geologists who examined the raw data disagreed. Basalt rarely fractures into such consistent horizontal planes, and almost never with stair-like precision. But dissenting reports were quietly withdrawn or retracted. Even Antarctica, long thought to be covered in ice for millions of years, has offered its own whisper of revelation. Satellite imaging showed anomalies beneath the ice, rectilinear features suggesting walls or platforms. When independent researchers attempted to analyze these images publicly, they were met with swift debunking campaigns. Yet none of the counterarguments addressed the core issue. The structures were geometrically precise and far too large to be natural. Climate scientists have also contributed unexpected pieces to this puzzle. Ice core samples reveal sudden, dramatic shifts in global temperature around 12,800 BCE, a period often associated with the Younger Dryas event. Mainstream theories blame comets or volcanic eruptions, but some scientists quietly suggested that these shifts may have been triggered or worsened by human activity. Not industrial activity, of course, but something else, perhaps the collapse of a widespread civilization whose coastal settlements were swallowed by rising seas, forcing mass migration and disrupting global ecosystems. When the oceans rose rapidly at the end of the last ice age, they would have erased entire nations. If the ocean kings truly ruled vast maritime territories, their capital cities would now lie miles beneath the waves. The destruction would have been total. Only cliffs and mountaintops would remain above water. Isolated survivors cut off from one another, their advanced knowledge lost or reduced to myth. But myths, as it turns out, store memory far longer than institutions. Indigenous groups from Australia to the Americas speak of ancestors who traveled the seas before the oceans swallowed their lands. Polynesian navigators recount tales of a great homeland far to the east, a place destroyed by angry waters. African tribes speak of sky readers who crossed the oceans with charts made of bone and light. In European legends, from the Tuatha De Danann to the ancient Basques, describe pale-skinned, star-guided mariners who arrived by sea, bringing knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and architecture. These legends align with genetic evidence in a way too perfect to ignore. Populations that share similar stories also share fragments of the same mysterious haplogroup XC. It is as if echoes of a single civilization scattered across the world, leaving behind fragments of story and fragments of bloodline. The final, and perhaps most compelling, piece of modern evidence comes from underwater acoustic surveys conducted by independent oceanographic teams. In several locations around the world, particularly in the mid-Atlantic, researchers recorded strange, rhythmic pulses emanating from deep ocean canyons. These pulses are too structured to be natural seismic activity. Some have suggested they're the resonant frequencies of ancient caverns or collapsed structures. Others believe they might be the remnants of technological activity long lost, like the resonating chambers found in ancient Egyptian temples, but magnified to unimaginable scales. Although mainstream institutions dismissed these findings as instrumental noise, researchers involved in the surveys insisted the patterns were intentional. One marine engineer compared them to harmonics produced by enormous metallic structures under intense pressure, structures that seemed almost alive, humming with the memory of their former purpose. Of course, none of this is presented to the public as a cohesive story. Each piece of evidence exists in isolation. A rejected genetic paper, an underwater scan tucked away in archives, a satellite anomaly explained away with vague language. But when assembled, they form a puzzle too coherent to be coincidence. What emerges is a picture of a world very different from the one we are taught. A world where a powerful maritime civilization ruled the oceans before the end of the last ice age. For thousands of years, prophecies concerning rising waters, returning gods, and ancient knowledge reawakening have circulated quietly among cultures separated by oceans and eras. These prophecies are often dismissed as mythic poetry or symbolic warnings. Yet when analyzed collectively, they reveal patterns far too consistent to ignore. They speak of a cycle, a long, repeating rhythm of destruction and renewal linked to astronomical events, shifting climates, and the reemergence of forgotten knowledge. Many ancient texts speak not only of the past fall of the ocean kings, but of their eventual return, a return not in physical form, but as a resurgence of their wisdom, encoded in both the earth and humanity itself. In many traditions, the Great Flood was not merely punishment, it was a reset, the collapse of an age. But these same traditions also contain the promise of a future awakening, when humanity would once again remember its lost origins. Some of these prophecies were whispered through indigenous groups who preserved oral histories without alteration for millennia. Others were encoded in esoteric writings, hidden behind symbols, numbers, and metaphors. And some, surprisingly, lie within scientific models predicting the Earth's cyclical environmental shifts. One of the most intriguing prophecies comes from the Hopi people of North America. They describe several world ages, each destroyed by a catastrophic force, fire, ice, water, and each followed by a new beginning. According to them, humanity is nearing the end of the current cycle, which will be marked by the return of the blue star and the reappearance of ancient knowledge lost in the previous world. Hopi elders describe people from an earlier age who could cross the great waters without effort and who fell because they forgot their spiritual responsibilities. These descriptions align curiously with the image of a maritime civilization whose downfall came from overreach, conflict, or environmental collapse. The Mayan Chilam Balam prophecies tell a similar story. They speak of beings who ruled the waters, who communicated with the stars, and who vanished beneath the sea in a time of great upheaval. But the Mayans also predicted a future cycle when the wisdom of the first people rises again as the waters change. Their calendar system, famous for its astronomical precision, seems to be less about predicting apocalypse and more about tracking cosmic cycles that influence global climate and human consciousness. With modern observations of shifting magnetic fields, increasing solar activity, and rising sea levels, some researchers have begun to wonder whether these ancient timekeepers knew of long-term planetary rhythms lost to modern science. The Hindu Puranas describe 4 great ages, or yugas, each representing a decline and renewal of human knowledge. In their earliest age, the Satya Yuga, humanity is described as advanced, virtuous, and deeply connected to universal laws. Interestingly, several Vedic texts mention a powerful maritime empire ruled by Nagas, serpent-like beings often interpreted as a metaphor for people who mastered water and navigational sciences. These texts predict a time when the lost sciences of the ancient ages will re-emerge, carried by people who are children of 2 worlds, a phrase that some modern scholars interpret symbolically, but which bears an uncanny resemblance to genetic anomalies linking populations across oceans. In Egyptian lore, the destruction of Zep-Tepi, the first time, is followed by the promise of its return. The priests of Heliopolis taught that in the distant past, divine rulers governed the earth and built great monuments aligned with celestial bodies. After the cataclysm, these rulers passed their knowledge to a select group of initiates. The prophecy of Zep Tepi states that the world will experience a rebirth when the stars realign and humanity remembers the truths hidden in the Earth's oldest structures. The Great Pyramid, with its precise astronomical alignments, is often interpreted as a stone time capsule, an encoded message from the previous age meant to speak to a distant future civilization. Many believe that future is now. These parallels become far more compelling when examined alongside scientific patterns of Earth's natural cycles. Climate scientists have identified recurring shifts every 12,000 to 13,000 years associated with solar storms, magnetic field weakening, and sudden sea level rise. These cycles match eerily with the timelines given in flood legends across the globe. If the ocean kings existed during the last cycle, their downfall would have coincided with the same environmental forces humanity may be experiencing again. Modern scholars outside academic institutions have begun interpreting ancient prophecies not as supernatural predictions, but as encoded memories of previous global catastrophes. Civilizations that survive such events rarely pass on technical knowledge. They pass on stories, warnings, and metaphors. But these stories often contain astronomical alignments, dates, numbers, and cyclical patterns too advanced for purely symbolic origin. It is possible that ancient societies preserved lost scientific knowledge in mythic form to ensure it would survive future collapse. Humanity, in a sense, may be decoding the message only now. One of the most enigmatic prophetic traditions involves the so-called sleeping archives, a concept found in Sumerian, Babylonian, and Hermetic writings. These texts speak of knowledge stored in the earth, accessible only when humanity reaches a specific stage of development. Some interpret this metaphorically as untapped human potential. Others interpret it geologically, referring to physical sites, underground libraries, sealed chambers, or submerged temples, waiting to be discovered. Strikingly, modern discoveries of underwater ruins and magnetic anomalies beneath the Giza Plateau have reignited interest in these ancient claims. But the prophecy most directly tied to the Ocean Kings does not come from an old manuscript. It comes from an unlikely combination of modern scientific models and ancient legends. In the past 2 decades, oceanographers have observed shifts in global currents that mirror those predicted in esoteric texts describing the return of the waters. These texts do not describe simple flooding. They describe a rebalancing of the planet's oceans, where submerged lands rise and coastal regions sink. Geologists have noted that plate tectonics and post-glacial rebound could make such shifts possible. Combined with rising global temperatures, these forces may expose ruins long hidden beneath the sea. This possibility has sparked renewed interest in Atlantean prophecies. Plato's account describes not just the fall of a civilization, but the prediction that its memory would one day return. Later esoteric writers, including those of the Renaissance and the early modern era, claimed that the age of rediscovery would occur when humanity re-enters an era of global connection. They believe that advanced knowledge stored in human DNA, dormant since the last cataclysm, would begin to reactivate. Modern genetic research has indeed identified dormant sequences that become active under environmental stress. Could ancient myths have recognized this long before science? Some mystical traditions go even further, suggesting that the Ocean Kings anticipated their downfall and left behind a long-term message encoded in symbols, monuments, and genetic signatures. According to these traditions, this message would awaken only when humanity reached a critical point, technologically advanced enough to understand the clues, yet spiritually evolving enough to use the knowledge wisely. Whether symbolic or literal, these prophecies speak of a convergence, a moment when genetics, archaeology, astronomy, and mythology reveal a shared truth. The idea of cycles, civilizations rising, falling, and rising again, is central to nearly every ancient culture. And if humanity truly stands at the edge of another great cycle, the reemergence of forgotten knowledge may be both inevitable and necessary. The ocean kings, in this interpretation, are not returning physically. What returns is the memory of them, their wisdom, their mistakes, their technologies, and their connection to the deep rhythms of the earth. As rising seas, shifting climates, and global uncertainty intensify, the ancient prophecies feel less like distant metaphors and more like coded warnings from a civilization that endured the same cycle before us. Perhaps the lost mariners foresaw that humanity would once again face a great transition. Perhaps they left clues for us, knowing that only when we reached a similar turning point would we be able to interpret them. This is the essence of the ancient prophecies related to the ocean kings. We are not just discovering the past, we are repeating it. And somewhere within that repetition lies the key to understanding who we truly are, where we came from, and what the future may hold when the forgotten truths finally rise again from the depths. Long before the first satellites circled the Earth, long before sonar traced the ocean floors, ancient cultures already seemed to possess an uncanny understanding of global cycles. Cycles of destruction, renewal, rising seas, and falling lands. But they also spoke of something deeper, something more mysterious. A coded message left behind by those who lived before the last great cataclysm. This message was not written in one place or one language. It was scattered across continents, encoded in stone monuments, star maps, genetic markers, mythological symbols, and rituals preserved by esoteric traditions. It was meant, perhaps, for a distant future age. And curiously, many of these traditions specify that this message would become clear only when humanity reached a certain threshold of awareness. Some call this threshold the awakening era. And many believe that era began around 2025. From the outside, 2025 may look like any other year, one filled with ongoing crises, technological expansion, and global uncertainty. But beneath these surface events lies a convergence of patterns, scientific, environmental, social, and spiritual, that mirror ancient warnings and predictions. This convergence has been described in prophecies from the Andes, from Egypt, from Polynesia, from the mystery schools of Greece, and from Hermetic texts preserved in Europe. Each of them describes an inflection point, the moment when the world begins to remember. One of the most widely discussed clues comes from the alignment of certain astronomical cycles. Researchers studying precession, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, found that around the mid-2020s, the Earth reached a phase known in some esoteric calendars as the crossing of the ages. Ancient Indian, Tibetan, and Hermetic texts describe this crossing as a bridge between the age of darkness and the age of rediscovery. It is not a sudden event, but a gradual awakening, like the first light of dawn cresting over the horizon. In Andean traditions, the Karo people speak of the Pachacuti, a prophesied time when the world would be turned right side up again. They say that after centuries of spiritual sleep, humanity would begin to reconnect with forgotten truths. Their prophecy highlights a specific window of time beginning around 2000 and intensifying after 2020. The Pachacuti marks the return of ancestral memory, knowledge that existed before the great floods washed over ancient civilizations. Many elders claim that the knowledge returning now is not new, but ancient, reborn through the collective consciousness. Perhaps the most striking parallels to this idea come from the Pacific. Polynesian navigators, who preserved complex star path traditions, spoke of cycles in which the seas would rise, fall, and rise again. According to their oral histories, every major shift in the ocean's rhythm corresponds with a shift in human consciousness. They believe that the knowledge of their first ancestors, those who crossed the endless waters before the world drowned, was encoded not in scrolls or monuments, but in stories, chants, and symbols meant to awaken when humanity entered a new age. Many Polynesian elders have noted that the last decade has seen a rise in the rediscovery of ancient navigation techniques, star lore, and forgotten genealogies, just as their ancestors predicted. Meanwhile, in Egypt, a less-known fragment of Hermetic writing speaks of the revealing, a time when the stars, earth, and human spirit align to expose ancient truths once concealed. According to this text, the revealing would occur when the world experienced great turbulence, political instability, environmental shifts, and technological acceleration. What is remarkable is that the text also describes this time as one during which the foundations beneath the sea shall whisper again. With a recent rise in underwater archaeological discoveries, these ancient descriptions feel uncannily relevant. But beyond prophecies and symbols, there is a modern dimension to this awakening, one rooted in the collective psychology of humanity. Around the world, there's been a growing fascination with ancient civilizations, underwater ruins, DNA mysteries, lost continents, and alternative histories. People are no longer satisfied with the linear timeline taught in schools. They feel intuitively that something is missing. This cultural shift itself reflects a deep subconscious stirring, as if humanity is remembering a story it has forgotten. It is in this context that the idea of an encoded message from the Ocean Kings becomes compelling. Some esoteric traditions describe this message as the memory locked in the blood, implying that human DNA contains dormant sequences that may activate under certain environmental or psychological conditions. Intriguingly, modern geneticists have discovered that stress, climate changes, and even shifts in solar radiation can influence which genes become active. While this has nothing to do with literal ancestral memories, the symbolic parallel is haunting. Under pressure, the human species begins to awaken. Monuments also play a role in this awakening. Structures like Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids of Egypt, sunken ruins off Japan's Yonaguni coast, and the megaliths of Malta all point to a level of coordination and sophistication predating known civilizations. Researchers have long noticed that many ancient structures align with star positions as they appeared around 10,500 BCE, the very period associated with flood myths worldwide. One interpretation is that these monuments are markers placed intentionally to signal a forgotten epoch. But the deeper view, held by mystery schools and esoteric lineages, is that these monuments are part of an ancient signal architecture. Their alignments, dimensions, and positions carry encoded information about Earth cycles, celestial events, and the rise and fall of ages. These structures become meaningful only when humanity rediscovers astronomy, mathematics, and global communication, conditions met only in the last century. Another layer of this awakening is the resurfacing of long-lost rituals, chants, and symbols. In many ancient cultures, initiation ceremonies involve symbolic representations of drowning, rebirth, or descending into darkness before emerging with new vision. These symbols echo the great cataclysm that ended the era of the Ocean Kings. Some of these rituals were suppressed during colonial eras or by religious institutions, but have now begun to reappear around the world, revived by cultural preservationists and spiritual seekers. The timing of their revival aligns strikingly with global interest in ancient wisdom. Scientifically, the year 2025 and the decade surrounding it mark major shifts. Earth's magnetic field has been weakening at an accelerated rate. Solar activity cycles have entered an unpredictable phase. Ocean temperatures have shifted dramatically, and new anomalies, geological, atmospheric, and biological, have appeared without easy explanation. While none of these prove ancient prophecies, they certainly echo their language. Shifts in Earth's energy, changes in the waters, and the return of knowledge from previous cycles. Even technology is part of this awakening. As the final threads of this long and winding story come together, a single, unsettling question begins to rise from the depths. What if the lost ocean kings were not simply a forgotten chapter of the past, but a mirror held up to the present? What if their rise and fall, preserved in myth, encoded in DNA, hidden beneath rising seas, was meant to warn us about the age we now live in? Because in many ways, our modern world reflects the same patterns that ancient cultures warned about, the same patterns that appear in the last days of the great maritime civilization that once ruled the oceans before the great floods. In the echoes of their story, we see ourselves. The ocean kings were said to have mastered the seas, harnessing knowledge passed down from generations who had studied the stars, the tides, and the deep patterns of the earth. Their empire stretched across continents, unified not by conquest, but by navigation, trade, and shared cosmology. But in the end, their greatest strength became their downfall. Their reliance on coastal cities and oceanic routes made them vulnerable to the very forces they believed they had mastered. When the seas rose and storms intensified, their world collapsed with terrifying speed. Today, our world stands on a similar precipice. Climate patterns shift unpredictably. Ocean temperatures rise faster than models predicted. Megastorms and floods occur with alarming frequency. Coastal cities, from New York to Mumbai, from Jakarta to Miami, face the same threat that once swallowed the cities of the ocean kings. We often think of ourselves as technologically advanced, untouchable, far removed from ancient collapses. But the truth is humbling. We are just as dependent on stable oceans, predictable climates, and fragile coastlines as they were. In fact, in some ways we're even more vulnerable. This is not the only parallel. Archaeologists studying ancient maritime cultures often describe a sudden fragmentation of society, with once unified cultures breaking apart into isolated factions. Myths describe internal conflicts, political divisions, and a loss of shared purpose. These narratives closely resemble modern tensions, nations turning inward, alliances fracturing, polarization rising. Many historians believe that collapse often begins not with a single disaster, but with the erosion of unity, the weakening of the invisible threads that hold civilizations together. The ocean kings may have faced a similar unraveling. Legends of their final days describe turmoil, competing philosophies, and a breakdown of the shared cosmology that once guided their decisions. Their navigators lost trust in one another. Their scholars could not agree on the meaning of celestial signs. Their leaders disagreed on how to respond to environmental changes. And while they debated, the waters rose. Yet their story is also one of extraordinary resilience. Survivors of the collapse carried fragments of knowledge across the world. These survivors became the ancestors of countless cultures, teaching navigation to Polynesians, astronomy to Egyptians, agriculture to Andean peoples, and megalithic architecture to Europeans. They did not disappear entirely. They transformed, adapted, and seeded the world with wisdom that would guide humanity through the next cycle. This cyclical pattern appears in nearly every ancient cosmology. Civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, each time remembering a little more of what was lost. The cycle is not a punishment, but a rhythm, a cosmic tide matching the movements of the earth itself. And if the myths are true, then humanity today stands at the threshold of another transition, another turning of the cosmic wheel. The difference is that this time, we have the chance to break the cycle. In ancient prophecies, the collapse of a great maritime civilization is always followed by an age of renewal, when survivors rediscover forgotten truths and slowly rebuild. But the prophecies also speak of a distant future age, our age, when humanity would finally understand the mistakes of the past. This understanding, they say, is what allows a civilization to transcend the cycle rather than repeat it. A crucial part of this understanding lies in our relationship with the oceans. The ocean kings knew the seas intimately. They respected them, feared them, and studied them with devotion. Their downfall came when they forgot the ocean's power. Today, humanity too has drifted from its understanding. We think of the oceans as resources to exploit or barriers to overcome, not as living systems that sustain and shape all life on Earth. As we face rising seas, acidification, and collapsing marine ecosystems, the warnings of ancient cultures ring with urgent clarity. The ocean does not yield to arrogance. Another lesson lies in unity. The ocean kings flourished when their world was connected, when knowledge, trade, and culture flowed freely across vast distances. But in the final days, isolation and division hastened their collapse. Today's global challenges cannot be solved by individual nations. Climate change, ecological decline, and mass migration are forces that transcend borders. The ocean kings remind us that separation weakens us in times of crisis. Only shared purpose and collective action can steer humanity safely through the storms ahead. Perhaps the most profound lesson, however, concerns memory. The ancient mariners encoded their knowledge in myths, monuments, star maps, and symbols because they understood that memory is fragile. They understood that the greatest danger to future generations would not be rising seas, but forgetting who we are, where we come from, and what forces shape our world. In many ways, we are now rediscovering what they tried to preserve. We are mapping underwater ruins that reveal cities older than recorded history. We are decoding genetic sequences that hint at long-lost migrations. We are revisiting ancient myths and realizing they may be encoded histories, not fantasies. We are noticing the familiar patterns in climate cycles and societal stresses. And we're beginning to ask the same questions the ocean kings once asked. How do we survive the turning of the age? How do we prepare for what lies ahead? Perhaps the answer lies not in avoiding the cycle, but in evolving with it. The ocean rises and falls. Temperatures shift. Civilizations adapt. But the greatest constant in this cycle is human curiosity, the desire to understand, explore, and connect. It was curiosity that allowed the ocean kings to master the seas. It was curiosity that led survivors to preserve fragments of ancient wisdom. And it is curiosity that drives us now to uncover their story. In the end, the tale of the ocean kings is not just about a lost civilization. It is about the arc of humanity, our triumphs, our mistakes, our resilience, and our potential. It is about recognizing that history is not linear, but tidal. It flows, recedes, and returns in waves. And right now, a wave of ancient memory is rising. The question is, will we listen? Because their message is not a warning of doom, but a reminder of possibility. A reminder that civilizations can fall, but they can also rise higher than before.